for me, and I welcome their hatred.
What is up, everybody? This is Hater Radio. My name is Chris McLean. This is a college football media brand dedicated to the wonderful sport of college football. I'm here with my co-host, Ian Gibson. How are you, Ian?
I'm doing really good. The hits don't stop coming after this weekend of games.
Yeah, I mean, dude, I honestly was really happy for these games because it was like, I know that first round kind of like, I don't know, just pissed people off for whatever reason. People weren't happy in those first round of games, but it's like, this round seemed to definitely rebound from that negative perception. You know, one game went to overtime. The Georgia game was close almost all the way through for the most part. And then, the Boise State game wasn't even that bad. Really, it was only the Oregon game that was like a clunker game. But then the other thing I wanted to talk about with all these games, which we'll talk about specifically with each one, and we talked about it before the show, is the fact that special teams was a huge theme for all these games throughout everyone except for the Oregon game. There was a punt return for a touchdown in the Texas game. There was a kickoff return for a touchdown in the Notre Dame game. In the Notre Dame game, there was a mass sub on the punt that led to a first down that basically ended the game for Notre Dame. Boise State had two missed field goals that could have kept them in the game. They missed them, and they like basically turned the whole game because of that. The first one was on a really nice drive to start the game, and they missed the field goal, didn't get any points, kind of like set the tone for the rest of the game. Texas missed two field goals that could have won it in regulation. Just, had huge effects on how these games were going down. And, I know that we focus a lot on offense and defense in most of our preparation and analysis of these games, but clearly special teams here was a huge factor in almost all these games, led to wins for the teams that perform better in the special teams games. But let's get into it. Okay, so we got the first game. We were talking about Boise. So Boise State, Penn State in the Fiesta Bowl on Tuesday night, New Year's Eve night. Like I said, that first drive, Boise State leads to a missed field goal. And then two drives right in a row for Penn State lead to touchdowns. They're up 14-0 early, and it looks like it's going to be a blowout because then on the ensuing drive, Genty fumbles the ball and Penn State recovers. And like this game looks like it's over like instantly. Penn State, though, fumbles the ball back. And Boise State's able to get a drive going, scores a touchdown, makes it 14-7. They go back and forth a bit. Field goal makes it 17-7 at halftime, or after the half. Boise State gets a touchdown to make it 17-14. This game was close right there, and it seemed like, okay, we might have a game here. Genty started doing a little bit more in the second half. He had a couple big runs, couple like runs where he was like bouncing off like 5 or 6 tacklers. Allard did enough in this game. He found Tyler Warren in big spots for touchdowns. He hits him again to go up 24-14. There was that point as well where Boise State had a touchdown taken off the board for, I believe, a holding, right? Wasn't that the call?
I think, yeah.
Yeah, so that was a huge moment in the game. Another missed field goal. This game, honestly, it looks deceiving because it's like, 31-14, and that's 3 scores, but honestly, it was a lot closer than it looked. I think Boise had their chances. They just couldn't take advantage of it. But Ian, what were your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, so Penn State's defense was really the story of this one because they were able to, it's what I said in the pregame, was if they can contain Genty and Madsen would have to make plays, that is going to be the recipe for a victory for Penn State. And it was. They did a fantastic job clogging the middle of the lanes, finding Genty's tendencies, and just bullying the offensive line of Boise State to where Genty couldn't have a lot of space in the back. Madsen, while he did throw for 300 yards, he did force 3 interceptions as well.
Yeah.
That kind of stat just showed, like, when it came down to it, if you take Genty away from the offense, it's very difficult for Boise State. And we've seen that this year. As capable as Madsen is against that type of defense for Penn State, there just wasn't any way when you didn't have a balanced attack. While Penn State, Allen and the Penn State rushing was able to set up Alar on a lot of these touchdown passes. And those touchdown passes were absolutely perfectly placed. That was probably Alar. I know it was I think he only threw for like 170 yards or something.
Yep.
So when it mattered, he came up with the big passes and when they mattered most. But I think the MVP of the game was Penn State's defense, making sure that Boise State in that game was in third and long situations and not third and manageable to what they were used to, and making sure Genty didn't have any lanes to run. So for me, the MVP of the game was Penn State.
Well, I mean, I think you definitely have to look at Katron Allen too, because he had 134 yards on the ground. I know that Nick Singleton had some yards too, but it was really largely on that one run. But Katron Allen was like gashing Boise State almost the entire day. 17 carries for 134. If you take out that one run for Nick Singleton, I think he had like maybe 30 yards on like 10 carries. So it would have been like a 3-yard average. No, I think it's funny because like I was thinking about it either last night or the other day where I was like, if Penn State just had like 1 or 2 really good receivers, their offense would be like dynamite because, they've got the 2 running backs, you've got Warren, but it's like, it seems like they're hampered because they have no real like wide receiver threats, like really at all. I know the one guy had a decent game, Omari Evans, but I mean, it was like 2 catches. Is that really a decent game? I mean, I know one of them was a long TD, but like, the rest of those guys are just like average or like just not great. I don't know. It's amazing that Penn State, they can recruit almost everything else. They've got studs on almost the entire team, defensively, offensively, and then they just don't have wide receivers. It's like their one big weakness. And I think that may come into play in a game against Notre Dame because, Notre Dame, if you saw, they were able to effectively take out Georgia's tight ends. So if they're able to do the same thing against Penn State, they're going to struggle to move the ball because they don't have any receivers that really separate and make big plays. So that could be their downfall in this game against Notre Dame. And even if they move on to Texas and Ohio State, who both have tremendous defenses. So I think out of the 4 teams, I think Penn State is the least of those teams. And I think that they're not going to make it to they're not going to win the championship. I think they could still beat Notre Dame, but I don't think they will beat either Texas or Ohio State. Do you have any more thoughts from this game before we move on?
No, just like I said, the defense of Penn State containing Genty and just how balanced the offense was. That's what I observed most from the Fiesta Bowl.
Yeah, and it's a shame because Genty, I was expecting a big game. I thought something huge, but they were plugging the holes really well, getting in the gaps, and then they were also, it was forcing him in the middle. He never really got outside a ton, and he also, when they were going to stop him, it was multiple guys. It wasn't just like one guy was trying to make a tackle. It was like 2 or 3 guys. And so he was constantly being just barraged with tacklers, and it made the difference. They focused on it. And like you said, Madsen was the focus after that. He had to make plays. And I think he did make enough plays to keep them in it. It just was the interceptions were brutal. Okay. Moving on to January 1st, New Year's Day games. We were originally going to have 3 games, but a terror attack in New Orleans on the French Quarter really changed the trajectory of that game. They postponed it to the Thursday, yesterday, January 2nd. Just terrible incident and, really difficult situation for everyone involved. Thinking about all those people that lost their lives. And, it's really terrible to hear about that. But they had to keep the games going, so they scheduled it for Thursday, and we'll talk about that one later. But let's talk about the first ones from the rest of the day. Arizona State, Texas in the Fiesta Bowl, right?
Peach Bowl.
Peach Bowl. Yeah, Fiesta Bowl was the one on Thursday, or Tuesday. I know there's games all over the place. Okay, so Arizona State, Texas. Arizona State, they got they were punting early off of a 3-and-out situation. Texas roughs the kicker. They drive further. They get a field goal. So 3 points that Arizona State was kind of gifted there because of Texas's overzealousness. But then on offense, Texas, huge play, gets them into Arizona State territory right away. And then a throw by Ewers real quick. So 2 plays, they're up 7-3 really quick. And then they force another stop. This time they don't run into the kicker. Arizona State punts it to Texas, and it's a punt return for a touchdown. So boom, right away, Texas has touched the ball 3 times, and they're already up 14-3. Quite a huge start for Texas there. A field goal by Texas makes it 17-3. There's a fake punt by Arizona State, gives them some life. They get down. They have a field goal attempt, but it is blocked. So we go into half 17-3. Arizona State drives again, turnover on downs. But then, a fumble by Arizona State when they're closer in the red zone leads to a safety. So that kind of changed the trajectory of the game a little bit. They're forced into another field goal. They make it this time after a good drive, 17-8. Quinn Ewers puts them up 24-8. And actually, it looks like at that point, Texas was going to roll and this was going to be over. And then Scattaboo on a 4th down play, halfback pass, hits McClain for a touchdown. They go for 2. They're only down 8 at this point. Quinn Ewers comes back, throws a deep pass, gets intercepted, and Arizona State is in business. Scattaboo runs it in. They hit the 2 points. It's tied 24-24. And again, Texas's kicker, like we talked about earlier, misses 2 field goals that should have won the game in the regulation. They go to overtime. Arizona State scores first, and UT is down to 4th down. They need a play here. Ewers hits Golden for a touchdown, 31-31. Next play on the ensuing start of second overtime, Ewers hits Gunnar Helm for a quick TD and the 2-point conversion, 39-31. And then Levitt is picked off, game over. It was back and forth after Texas went up 24-8, and it was really close. And honestly, my wife was making fun of me because she was thinking that Arizona State was going to win and was rooting for them. And I was just not that I didn't want to see Arizona State win. I just know that if Texas won, that whoever they played the next round would be a more compelling game. And I felt like if Arizona State won, it wouldn't have been as compelling. And I hope so, at least. Who knows? It might not be. But no, I felt like, Arizona State definitely deserved to be there. Scattaboo had a huge game. I know we've talked about him all year. We've talked about him last year too. We talked about him before anyone else knew about him. And he had 143 yards on the ground, 99 in receiving. He had, I think, like another 50 passing. Just a remarkable game by him. He won the offensive MVP, even though his team lost, which is quite remarkable. The thing that I got to say about this game, like, I'm really getting tired of people trashing Quinn Ewers. I don't get it. Like, I don't see what other people see. Like, they, for some reason, don't think Quinn Ewers is a good quarterback. I see a perfectly good quarterback. I see a guy in this game throw for, a 66.6 completion percentage, 322 yards, 3 TDs, ran for another TD. Yes, he had the one pick, but that's literally like the one bad pass in an entire game of good passing. I don't see why people hate him so much. I don't get it. I know Texas fans are like clamoring for Arch Manning, but like, really, Quinn Ewers was one of the higher recruits ever when he came out of high school. I don't get the like fervor against him. It really doesn't make any sense. I've been a huge fan of his for the last 3 years. I think he's a very solid quarterback. I think he should definitely get drafted, at least late first round, maybe second round quarterback in this draft. Makes sense. Um, his hatred is undeserved, and he deserves his flowers, and I'm going to give it to him because I feel like he deserves it. But Ian, your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, this was definitely took a turn in the third quarter because, like you and probably everybody else watching, once Texas was up 24-8, we kind of thought they were going to coast on this one. But this is a thing that Texas is having a problem with, that a lot of teams. Why can't you just put games away? Like they were up 24-8. They had this game. They had it. And I know the stats will say Arizona State outpossessioned them, outgained them, which is true. But by that point in the third quarter, it was all Texas. Arizona State couldn't generate anything. Sure, they gave up the safety, and sure, you had the big play from Scatterbo throwing it. But you have to respond. You still have to put a team out. But for whatever reason, they have really struggled just trying to put teams away that, yes, Texas on paper is better than them. Texas was better than Georgia both times, and they couldn't get out of their own way. That was the thing, is Texas still found a way to get in its own way, but luckily was bailed out in the end. That 4th and 13 play really just showed, like, because first of all, it was 4th and 8. Then you get the false start. Then it's like expedited there. Now, like, and that was like, just showed like how good Quinn Ewers really is. Calm in the pocket. It was like 1st and 5 for him.
Yeah.
Tossed it over the middle, golden wide open, touchdown Texas. And then they score on the ensuing drive, and then, the interception to tie it. Arizona State literally did everything possible they could to win that game. It just, in the end, Texas found a way to win when they were really trying hard not to. It really felt like that. They just could not get Arizona State off the field, and Scatterbo more than deserved that MVP award. I don't care if they lost. I remember saying that in overtime. I was like, if Arizona State loses, Scatterbo is still the best player this game, and it's not even close because he willed every single play for Arizona State to at least get a couple more yards or everything like that. When he was throwing up on the sideline, he was very emotional and got upset, but he didn't rallied the team and was able to tie it, almost win it. But in the end, Texas finds a way to win. They just, now moving forward, playing Ohio State, you've got to find a way. If you get ahead, you cannot let a team like that back into it, because they will make you pay for it.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like if anything, with these last 2 games for Texas, I think they're really, fortunate to have won this game, because they easily could have lost this. And I think going forward into a game against Ohio State, who, coming into the year, everyone mentioned how they were the most talented team in the country, and they are like hands down. I think in every facet of their team they are. But I will say I think the difference again, and I'm gonna I've just been talking about it earlier, um, with quarterback between Ohio State and Texas. I feel like Quinn Ewers is a better quarterback than Will Howard, and I think that may be the difference in the game because Quinn has made some mistakes, but then there's been games where Will Howard is like really imploded, and I think that may be come to play in the game between the two. But again, like you said, they need to be able to close out these games because if they're getting in close games or they're getting up, if they're getting leads, they need to be able to put the pedal to the metal and finish it off. So let's move on to the Rose Bowl, Oregon, Ohio State. This game was setting up to be a huge game. It was like rematch of a huge game that was basically the game of the year earlier in Eugene. And we all thought, okay, neutral site, even playing field. Let's figure this out. Let's see who the better team is. And it was never close. Ohio State just throttled them from beginning to end. I mean, it was 31-0 before you even blinked. And or 34-0, sorry, before you even blinked. So it was just a thrashing. And Oregon just, when I was watching the replay and I remember watching the game, and it's like they couldn't get first downs, they couldn't get more explosive plays. They kind of were just like in neutral the entire time, and they were getting forced into 3 and outs really quickly, and you can't do that against good teams. Like if you're going to get forced into 3 and outs, like you at least have to like one, hold teams to field goals, or two, start making some stops on defense. But they couldn't do that at all. I think it wasn't until later in the game they started getting some stops, but it was like at that point it was already way out of reach. So this Oregon team is talented as well, not to the level that Ohio State is, but they should have been able to compete in this game. I don't know. Did you hear why Evan Stewart wasn't playing that much in this game?
I didn't actually.
I mean, I never got a good answer as to why that was an issue. I don't know if is he transferring or what? Like, I didn't see, but I don't know. It just seemed like there were some issues. I mean, he didn't even have a catch. So I don't know what was going on. Some guys had decent games for them after it was already way too late. That was basically Ohio State playing prevent defense at that point. So allowing a lot of things in front of them. But, the first half, man, when you go down that much, it's really hard. I mean, that was 5 touchdowns that they were down. And that's really hard to try to stop at that point. So, hats off to Ohio State, gets their revenge. They didn't even win the Big Ten. They didn't even get to the Big Ten championship game. And they're now, 2 wins away from winning the national title. This is why it is so important that we expanded the playoff, because in a 14 playoff, Ohio State doesn't even get a shot at getting to the to the semifinals. And now a team like Ohio State proves themselves on the field that they're worthy. They beat Tennessee. They beat Oregon. They probably have the 2 best victories in the playoffs so far, because, those were 2 of the better teams that anyone has faced. They played the 1 seed and they played the highest lower end seed as well. So like literally they've played the lowest combination of seeds that anyone has played yet. And they deserve it. Like Ohio State, I mean, I talked about it with Jeremiah Smith, and I want to bring this up again because I talked about it the last time against Tennessee. Dude, Jeremiah Smith is a freak, man. This kid is a freshman, and he looked so dominant. I mean, he just put up huge numbers. It was 187 yards on 7 catches for 2 TDs. He just was like, he had one where the first touchdown he had was a short throw, like just beyond the offensive line, and he just took it right through them and went right through the heart of Oregon. And you knew right away that it was like, oh, this is for real. And I'm almost positive, I can't remember for sure, that Jeremiah Smith wasn't much of a factor in the first matchup. But man, was he ever a force in this game, because he just dominated from beginning to end. You know, they had no answer for him. Nobody can guard him. The kid's like 6'3", 6'4", like super fast, amazing hands, just great route running. I mean, he is like, if you want to talk about a freak of nature for a wide receiver, this kid is it. And I'm going to keep saying it because he's just proving it every game. And, we'll get another stage for him next week on January 9th or 10th or whatever day the game's going to be played. I think these games are going to get swapped because of the fact that the Sugar Bowl got moved. But regardless, Ian, your thoughts?
Yeah, this is why I always say when a team plays another team for the second time, usually history says the team that lost is going to find a way to win this one, and that is the case. Somebody brought up a good point, and it was funny. I mentioned it when talking about this game. This was the biggest point differential for a rematch since the Florida Gators beat Florida State in 1996. So,
which the 28th anniversary was yesterday.
Yes, it was. Also, the anniversary of when Steve Spurrier got hired. So January 2nd is a pretty good day for the Gators.
Yeah.
Ohio State, like I said, they were really close in the last game, and they could have easily won that game with Oregon, but Oregon was staying toe to toe with them, and I don't think Ohio State really knew how to win that game. But this is the Ohio State team where we've been expecting all year. I said it, like Ohio State and Texas was like the two best teams in the country. It's theirs to lose. There's no excuse. And then they drop a game against, or losing to Oregon the first time, fine, because it was close and all that.
Right.
Michigan, there's still no excuse for that one.
Yeah.
But now they're starting to realize, okay, this is how good we are and we can be. They did a fantastic job, especially on defense. The defense does not get enough credit for Ohio State. They have been all season lights out. Probably their only bad game was that first Oregon game, and even then, they still kept it close.
Yeah.
They were able to make Oregon very one-dimensional. They were able to make Dylan Gabriel have to force to throw drag routes, mid-yard plays. There was not a big shot play Oregon could really capitalize on because the secondary was playing very good cover 3. Meanwhile, Chip Kelly, driving the stake through the heart of the Oregon defense. The motions of the wide receivers motioning left to right was very confusing on whether, they're running, throwing, where the routes were. And that, the one wide open pass to Jeremiah Smith just showed like how exposed Oregon was that game. All in all, Ohio State showed how good they can be and how good they should have been all year in this game. I mean, it's better late than never, but they are undoubtedly the hottest team in the playoff right now, because this was a very good Oregon team. As much as they have made games close before, there was no doubt they were the number one team in the country, and Ohio State just boat raced them.
Yeah, I mean, it never was close. And, I'm looking at the stats, Oregon had negative 23 yards rushing. That was a huge factor. It was just, Ohio State was in the backfield the entire time. Dylan Gabriel never had time. They dominated the line of scrimmage. And that's the other thing is like, yeah, we talked about special teams with a lot of these games, but the other thing to talk about is the trenches and offensive and defensive lines with all these teams. You were clearly seeing the teams that have won and the teams that have looked better in these games have had the better O lines and D lines. And, Texas stands out with their offensive line. Notre Dame's D line and their pressure stands out a lot. Ohio State and their D line stands out a ton. Just, it's remarkable what it does for teams. Like I'm looking at Ohio State's sack total, and I think they had 8 sacks That is crazy. 8 sacks is against like one of the best teams in the country, like undefeated, Big Ten champion, and they had 8 sacks against them. And and I'll translate this to Florida. That seems to be where the difference is with Florida the last half of the season, was where they were getting pushed around most of the year. And then now you see the second half of the season, the offensive line did better, and then the defensive line for Florida just dominated. It really does make a difference when you are able to control the line of scrimmage, because you force the opposing offense out of their game plan, and you make it more difficult for them to, one, complete passes, and then two, to be able to get any sort of run game going. And that basically takes a team out of it completely. And and if you're able to protect the quarterback as well, you do a tremendous amount of momentum moving forward, because you're able to like give yourself time, and if a quarterback has time, they usually can pick apart a defense, because the coverage is not going to last much longer in the defensive backs. So let's move on to Notre Dame, Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. Like I said, this game got postponed until yesterday, January 2nd. This game was a little boring at first, because it was like back and forth. Nothing was really going on. And then it was like almost like, I know, Ian, you remember when Anthony Richardson had his first start against Georgia. And it was similar to that in some ways, not exactly, but like close to that. So Georgia is losing 6-3. Kirby Smart has a first-time quarterback playing, and he decides to go for a little more extra before half, and there's only like maybe 45 seconds left, and Gunnar Stockton goes back to pass. He gets sacked. He fumbles. Notre Dame gets the ball. First play, Riley Leonard has the ball, throws it to his wide receiver, touchdown. They're up, 13-3 going into half. And it's like, okay, that's not that big of a deal. Ensuing kickoff after the end of the halftime, Notre Dame returns the kickoff for a touchdown. Boom. It went from a 6-3 game to a 23 game in like the span of 50 seconds of game time. And that honestly was the difference, because even though, yes, Notre Dame scores a field goal and Georgia does get a touchdown later in the game, that was the difference right there. They were up 17. That's 3 scores. That's a huge momentum and like mindset, because it's like, oh, we're up 3 scores. So they have to have 3 possessions to be able to get this to even have a chance. And, that is like, gives you, one, your team a ton of confidence, and then 2, puts a lot of game pressure on the other team. And, Gunnar Stockton, I know I've been like joking on Twitter about like calling him trash. I guess he wasn't trash, but, he didn't have pocket presence on those fumbles, because he had 2 fumbles, one that it didn't matter because it went out of bounds, and then another that they lost. So 2 fumbles there, and he had an interception, I believe. Or wait, did he? Let me see. No, he didn't have an interception. And I'm like, he had 234 yards. One of the plays was on a huge catch and run by Arian Smith. But he also had one against Dylan Bell that should have been caught, that it wasn't. But again, let's also talk about the fact of the special teams subs on that one play, because it was like 11 came on for Notre Dame to punt. They didn't touch the ball. The center did not touch the ball, so it's still technically a dead ball. And because of that, they subbed everyone out. They basically forced Georgia to bring all their players on. They subbed everyone out. And when they subbed out, the ref holds onto the ball before they can actually snap it, so that Georgia can get all their players out. They got all their players out, about 5 seconds left on the play clock. And then Notre Dame was threatening to hike it. And then as they're about to, two Georgia players jump over the line of scrimmage. Well, the one thing, if you notice, and I saw a bunch of people complaining about it, was that the wide receiver for Georgia moved. Now, it looks like he moves after the Georgia players jump offside. So I don't think that technically would have negated that offsides. I think those Georgia players moved before he moved. And if that's the case, then it doesn't matter. I think it was technically offsides there. And that was a brilliant play call by Marcus Freeman, forcing Georgia's hand there, because Notre Dame ends up getting a couple first downs. Riley Leonard with that huge run, he comes off the left side and runs right into the Georgia player and gets the first down. They get another first down. They end up punting, but they punted with like a minute 50 left, and Georgia had no timeouts, and they were still down 2 scores, and Georgia just couldn't get anything going. Gunnar Stockton gets sacked on 4th down. Game over. Notre Dame wins their first huge bowl victory in like 30 years, like 32 years. Just amazing it's taken this long. But again, I've always said I've been a huge fan of Marcus Freeman. And I know last year, Ian, if you remember how high I was on Notre Dame, with Sam Hartman. And like, just imagine, and I'm just thinking about this now just because Duke played last night. Imagine if Riley Leonard stayed at Duke. Does Duke end up in the playoff? Like, that's how like crazy. I know it's wild to think, because maybe they would have beaten SMU, and then maybe they would have had a shot against Miami in that game. I don't know. It's weird to think of how this alternate universe has made things because of the transfer portal. But no, Marcus Freeman deserves all his flowers. They are a tremendous team. Defensively, they're really stout. Held Georgia to 10 points. Riley Leonard did not have like a ton of yards through the air, but he had 80 yards on the ground, which were huge, and just made the difference. He made plays when needed, and they made enough plays. And that's really what this team is they are a team that makes plays when they can. Leonard makes a huge difference being able to run the ball. He's very effective. Like I said, 80 yards on the ground, and just, this team, I'm telling you, I like Penn State, but I think that Notre Dame should be able to beat them. But what are your thoughts, Ian?
Yeah, this game, it definitely started slow, but man, it's interesting because this is more of like, I said, Georgia had, even without, they were saying, either without Stockton, Stockton was in, so maybe that's why Georgia wasn't affected. I was like, I don't know if Beck in this situation would have really moved the needle that much, because Beck wasn't really that great either. What just happened was Georgia just played out of their game plan. They couldn't get the run game going, and they were forced to throw the ball more. And Stockton did have a good game. I'm not going to deny that. But it wasn't like, set the world on fire. I mean, how Riley Leonard only had 90 yards of passing. But what Notre Dame did very well was they attacked the outside lane of Georgia. When running the ball and setting up those passes, they knew, like, Georgia's bread and butter has been, the interior run. You're not going to beat them running it up the middle. So they were able to at least stretch it out. They got most of those first downs were either Riley Leonard or the running backs just running to the outside on design runs or tosses. They did a great job on just extending plays, extending drives, playing keep away from Georgia. Yeah. And not only that, the defense of Notre Dame did very good stopping any rushing attack Georgia had. Georgia had like big pass plays, but they couldn't capitalize on them. Yeah. And then the running game wasn't there. And usually when the running game is not there for Georgia, it is very tough for them to win. Because, like I said, it's just their MO. Run, play action, pass, find the open guy, which was working at some points, but not the whole game. Yeah. So Notre Dame did a great job just making sure to plug those holes and making sure you do not get beaten on the ground by Georgia. Because if that happens, you're going to lose the game. And just when it came down to it, it wasn't just the penalties. It was the kickoff return. It was the fumble for the touchdown. Georgia really hurt themselves a lot. They not good coverage on the kickoff, wanting to get the extra points on, with a little time left, but it was fumbled, recovered, touchdown by Notre Dame. Obviously the offsides call, all that stuff. and just simply there was at least 3 times on third down that drive, Georgia could have stopped them. But Riley Leonard found a way. He went full John Elway, dove head first and got the first down.
Yeah.
And there was like 3rd and 7 and 8 on those drives.
Yeah.
And they still let them get the first downs. And it was running plays. They didn't throw the ball once that drive.
Right.
So I just couldn't understand how Georgia couldn't stop that.
Yeah.
So it was very, obviously Gator fan. I would be lying if I said I wasn't happy Georgia lost, but I was like, how do you lose that game? Because with all that stuff that went wrong, Georgia still, if they didn't get it in their own way, I still think was the better team, but it wasn't that night. And Notre Dame more than deservedly won that game.
I don't know if Georgia was the better team. I think because, if you look at it, I'm looking at the numbers. They were 2 of 15 on 3rd and 4th down. Notre Dame was a large reason for that because they were getting into the backfield and getting pressure on Stockton. There were some plays where Georgia players dropped them, specifically that Bell drop. But I think that Notre Dame played the game. I think they played the game the best way that they could and using their pieces, their chess pieces, the best that they could to be able to win this game. And I think that Georgia did not. And I think I saw somewhere that they didn't think that Kirby got outcoached. Clearly, he got outcoached in this game because he shouldn't have forced the issue late with Stockton because that directly led to a touchdown. And he clearly shouldn't have. He should have probably called a timeout on that 4th down. Like if I were him, I would have just called timeout because there was just too much confusion and there was a lot going on. He just, you needed to get the ball back there and it was like super important. I think a timeout would have been worthwhile to call there. So that was 2 plays he got out coached and it directly led to the results of the game. So, I don't know. I mean, Georgia, they haven't been able to run the ball massively effectively all year. They've been decent at running the ball. But then again, what we haven't talked about is ETN and his fumble. That was a huge part of the game because they were driving early and they looked like they were going to get at least 3 points. And then he fumbles it, to Notre Dame. And it kind of changed the flow of that game in the beginning. And, if Georgia maybe gets a couple of scores early, maybe the game's a little bit different. But I felt like Notre Dame's trenches were way better than Georgia's. And that's the difference in the game. And it's been the difference in a lot of these games here so far. Do you have any more thoughts before we close it out?
No, just, Georgia was its own worst enemy there.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm going to disagree. I mean, we can disagree on things because we usually agree on most of the things. But I'm just going to say I felt like Notre Dame forced them into situations that they failed on. I know there were some aspects that they did fail, but I feel like Notre Dame put the game pressure on them to make that happen. Okay, that is the show. We will be back on Sunday. I know this is weird because we're doing a preview show on Sunday, but it's just the schedule that we have because if we did a preview show on Wednesday, I wouldn't be able to advertise on YouTube for it. So it'd be like kind of a waste. So we're doing the show on Sunday for the preview of the semifinals. That will be Thursday and Friday. And so look for us then. 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific Sunday for the preview show. You can check us out on haterradio.com for all of our articles, our socials, just Hater Radio. Type that in for Instagram, Threads, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, X, Twitter. And Ian, what are your socials before we go?
Yeah, at Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter, it's at G_Gator_G.
Okay, Happy New Year, everybody. Enjoy these games coming up. I know it's been a lot of fun. The season's almost over, so enjoy these last 3 games. There's 3 more games. That's it. So we'll talk to you on Sunday. All right. Have a good weekend.